Hello and welcome everyone. We're so excited to have you with us for the Future Triton's Parents and Family Insights webinar. Thank you all for joining us today. We have some amazing special guests lined up who play a big role here at UC San Diego, and we can't wait for you to hear from them. Let's dive in and get started. Before we begin, here are a few housekeeping notes. This 60-minute webinar is designed to be an informative session. We will not be taking live questions during the webinar. A big thank you to all the parents and family members who submitted their questions in advance. We have carefully reviewed them, and our fantastic host, whom I will introduce very soon, will address the most popular ones throughout the webinar. Closed captioning is available. To enable it, click the live transcript icon and select Show Captions in your Zoom toolbar for automated captions. Additionally, we are pleased to offer Spanish translation for this webinar. To access the live Spanish interpretation, please use the controls at the bottom of the webinar window. Click on the globe icon labeled Interpretation and select Spanish. Instructions on how to access this is detailed in the chat. And now, without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce our MC for this special webinar, Jim Rawlins. Jim Rawlins holds a distinguished position of Associate Vice Chancellor of Enrollment Management at UC San Diego. As the university's foremost leader in enrollment initiatives, Jim spearheads the efforts of the Enrollment Management Division, orchestrating strategies to identify, recruit, admit, yield, enroll, and financially support a dynamic and diverse cohort of undergraduate students. In addition to these responsibilities, Jim fosters university-wide collaboration, forging strong partnerships with academic school, colleges, and various campus units. With over 30 years of experience in enrollment management and admissions, Jim is dedicated to helping families and students transition from high school to college or from college to university. Jim's influence extends beyond the campus as he actively engages with community stakeholders across the state, nurturing relationships with those who share a vested interest in UC San Diego's enrollment mission. Jim Rawlins embodies dedication, expertise, and a commitment to excellence in higher education enrollment management. Jim, I hand it off to you.
Thank you so much, Griselda. And thanks to the hundreds of you who have already joined us today. I know we'll have a few more people showing up in the coming minutes, but we're really excited to have you with us today. This is the first of a series of parent and family insight webinars we're going to do over the course of this admissions cycle. We tried doing parent programs for the very first time last spring with last year's applicants. Had a lot of demand for it, a lot of interest in it, so we're happy to bring this to you today. This is our October edition, and just so you'll know, we already plan to do at least one more of these, probably in mid-November, as you kind of work through the process with your student. And I'll also note, if some of you attending today are students, it's perfectly great, but I hope you won't take offense. You're not our focus today in terms of how we'll talk about things. We're trying to bring some guests together today that give you a sense of what it's like for your students to experience life on our campus, and our first two guests today are fantastic in that regard. So we're going to spend a little time with each of them, starting with Earl Edwards, who was our Director of Intercollegiate Athletics here at the University of California, San Diego. After him, we're going to have Karen Beesman join us. Karen is an Associate Vice Chancellor in our area of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, and she'll talk with us about the campus community centers. Following these two guests, and I promised them I'd get them back to a few other things they need to do this evening, the rest of our time will be me building off of some of that expertise Griselda just so kindly said we have to offer, and we'll talk with you about our admissions process and some of the things you might want to know at this time of year. But let's go ahead and get started first with Earl. We're going to talk about athletics. And as Griselda gets our cameras switched around and all that kind of stuff, I'll just note that I'm really excited to get to partner with Earl every day. In my few years here at UC San Diego, I've really enjoyed working with Earl. He's got great teams. They take good care of him. As you might imagine, for somebody working with admissions things, I'm very, very proud, even more than most would be, about the running record of several years running now, that UC San Diego's intercollegiate athletes have had the highest graduation rate of any public D1 or D2 institution in the United States, and just about the highest, Earl, I think, of any public or private school here on the West Coast. Did I get that right?
Yes, you
Uh,
did.
and they make me happy, but I should also note they're fantastic at what they do as well. Teams here have won 30 national championships over the last several years, as well as, I think I counted up 69 total conference championships during that time. And so great programs, and great to have you with us here today, Earl. What does it mean that we have just finished becoming Division I this year?
It means a lot, quite frankly. And that before I answer that, I just want to give the future Triton parents and family a little idea about our program, and I'll be quick.
That's great.
We offer 23 sports here at UC San Diego, pretty much everything except for football. We're members of the Big West Conference primarily, which consists of 5 UC schools, 5 state schools, and the University of Hawaii. So this year, being Division I, it's the first year that we're eligible for NCAA postseason play. So we're excited about the possibility of going on to our March Madness and other postseason activity. When we look at our athletes, we refer to our athletes as scholar athletes, and I want to piggyback on what Jim said in terms of the academic rigors. The other thing with being an athlete at UC San Diego is that about 150 or so of our contests are going to be on ESPN Plus. So you as parents and students will have an opportunity to see us compete and join that Triton spirit as we move forward.
That's terrific, Earl. So what does it mean? I mean, a lot of our listeners on here, their students may not be wanting to go into intercollegiate athletics themselves, but even then, it's part of probably what they're thinking about with campus community and all that.
Yeah.
So what do you think is going to change or grow about our campus vibe, I guess you could say, with us going D1 now?
Well, without question, the school spirit will significantly increase here at UC San Diego. And when I say school spirit, it's not just coming to the contests and watching the event. We do a lot of things to make it a experience. So it's whether seeing yourself on the 15 by 50 scoreboard or being involved with some of the promotions that we have or giving away different items. It's a fun environment to be in. And I would encourage that you look at fun activities to somewhat offset the rigors of the academic side on our campus, so you get that balance. So if you want to have some fun, come to our athletic events.
Very good. Are most of those events free, Earl, or is there anything that students should know about what it's going to cost them to go to things?
So for all of our undergraduate students, it's free. So there's no financial burden there. But we do sell tickets to other groups, whether it's alumni, faculty, staff, military, and so forth. General are anywhere from $6 to $10 if you're in one of those categories. But for the students, it's free. So I encourage you to come out to watch our athletic events across the board. And the other thing I'll say is, if you really want to get into details of UC San Diego athletics, all you have to do is go to our website, which is ucsdtritons.com. I'll repeat that, ucsdtritons.com, and that'll give you pretty much all the information you'll need as far as UC San Diego athletics.
That's terrific, Earl. Thanks very much. I had just put something in the chat to everybody too about a little page I always like to refer to in there that just is called About UC San Diego Athletics. But again, you want to take them to that homepage and there's all kinds of information there. I will tell you, as we looked at the questions we got from people looking forward to having you as our guest today, Earl, we got a lot of questions about just things related to club sports. And I'm not even sure everyone knows about the difference between club sports and NCAA teams, but Can you tell us a few things about what students should know if they're thinking about that, or is there a club and an intercollegiate version of some of these sports, and can they switch? I mean, how does that all work?
I'm glad you brought that up because anybody that's into sports, UC San Diego has a plethora of opportunities. As you mentioned, we have sport clubs. The sport clubs, I think there's around 40 or so. Those clubs are run by individuals outside of the athletic department, and all of the sport clubs are under the auspices of the recreation department. Some of the differences are we compete against other universities on a regular basis. NCAA sports, the club sports will also do something very, very similar. They don't offer scholarships like we do in the NCAA sports. That's a big difference. And usually there's a lot more requirements with NCAA sports as far as practices, academic progress towards a degree. Not to say that sport clubs don't practice, but they're not practicing as frequently as we are. And there is a duplication when I think of basketball, volleyball, soccer, baseball. Those are club sports as well as varsity sports. So if you're into sports in general, there's a lot of opportunities for you to get involved.
That's pretty great. Thanks for that, Earl. Another question we've got from a few people. I wonder if you can talk about students that just want to become a part of the things related to athletics. And again, that campus vibe around here. What do they need to do about something like the cheer team or the pep band, or heck, maybe they even want to get in a mascot costume at some point?
Yeah. So those activities that are very important to us as an athletic department, all of those things you just mentioned adds to the excitement and the fun that occurs at an athletic event. The best way to find out how to get involved would be to go to that website, ucsdtritons.com, and look up Todd Greenbaum. Todd Greenbaum, he's the person that oversees all of those areas, and he would be listed under the staff for athletics.
That's pretty great. And again, if any of you end up doing this, or parents and family, if any of your students end up doing this next year, I hope you'll come back and tell us that it started with Earl telling you needed to be in touch with Todd. That would be great. Earl, you've been here quite a while, and I've loved all the kind of experience with UC San Diego that you've shared with me as I got settled in here over the last few years. What's your favorite thing about being a Triton in terms of your role here and what you've gotten to love about this place over the years?
Well, what I like a lot about being a Triton, and particularly now that we're D1, is that we impact the university in a lot of different ways. We've already talked about the school spirit and bringing the campus together, which I think is extremely important since we have eight colleges. So the school spirit is a big aspect. The branding for the university, athletics does a lot of that as far as getting that information out there, and the fact that we're on TV and on radio and so forth. So we help with the branding. I like the connection with the alumni. I know we're talking to a young group that may be coming to UC San Diego, but if they do, then they'll end up joining the alumni family. So we're very much engaged with them. And then the last thing I'll say what I like about us being Division I now is the connection with the community. We can bring the community to our events. They get much more involved, and we also can tell the story about this great world-class university through our media as well as TV commercials. And we're probably the only one of the few areas where we can tell that story on a pretty frequent basis. So those are the things I really enjoy, and probably last but not least, with just being around the students. This is a very special place, and to see the students come in as young boys and girls, and to leave as young men and women is a great experience. So graduation would be the other piece that I would say that I really enjoyed.
That's terrific, Earl. Thank you for that. And thanks for spending time with all of us this afternoon. I believe one of the things you got to do now that we're wrapping up your part of the day, you've got to head off to one of our volleyball games tonight, right?
Yes, I'm heading out to watch our women's volleyball compete against Long Beach State. And I'm going to end my comments with something that all of you will be saying soon, and that is go Tritons.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Earl. Thanks for joining us and have a great afternoon.
Thank you very much. Have a good one.
You bet. And Karen Beesman will be up next as our second guest. I'll give Griselda a chance to move things around on there. Karen, welcome to you, and thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Jim. Pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. And I invited Karen to join us to talk with us about some things related to the work her area of campus does to create community with our actual centers. She'll talk about those today. So Karen, again, thank you very much for being here. Everyone, Dr. Beesman is a really treasured colleague of mine, and she and I have both been in other institutions, and we'd both like to think that that really gives us some perspective and appreciation for some of the things that we do here and the way we do them. So we're going to get to hear from her a little bit about that part of our campus today. So Karen, the first question I'll ask you today is, how do the 7 campus community centers you oversee foster connections and a sense of belonging here at UC San Diego?
I'm thrilled to share that. I just need to tell you, Jim, I just celebrated my 1-year anniversary as an assistant vice chancellor for student equity and inclusion, and it was the best decision I ever made as a career. And part of that joy is championing the 7 community centers. And for those of you who don't know who they are, allow me to list them, and also note that there's 7 community centers, but we're open to everyone, right? We lead programming through a cultural lens, but we're open to everyone. This includes the Black Resource Center, the Raza Resource Central, Intertribal Resource Center, APAMETA, which is shorthand for Asian Pacific Islander Middle Eastern Desi American Center, which is a vibrant, robust collection of identities, the Cross Cultural Center, the Women's Center, and the Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Trans Resource Center. We've been around for 30 years. What's important to know about these centers is that they were driven by student movements, right? Students who wanted places to be, staff to support them, programs to celebrate them, learning inside and outside of the classroom. They're vibrant, robust spaces. But in clearest terms, we play a vital role in fostering student success by providing welcoming and inclusive environments. We foster positive climates. We're places where everybody's respected, where everybody's seen and all voices are heard as their authentic selves. And we want this to be a place where everyone feels like they can thrive, where they can feel like they belong, where we center excellence, where we center joy, right? We're communities with heart. And I wanted to share a little bit more about that sense of belonging, if I could, Jim, because you ask yourself, well, those are wonderful missions, but what does it look like? And how do you do it? How do you create a sense of belonging, right? Most of us know what it feels like when we belong somewhere, but let me give you some examples of how I saw the centers do it just last week. We're finishing the Triton's Week of Welcome orientation activities. That means campus is really hopping, right? But last week I attended all the welcome events for the centers, and they were open to everyone. And what I saw were things like this. Belonging means you are greeted at the door with a smile and a friendly introduction. Belonging means you get to experience food, right? Students love to go to things where there are food, where there's art. You can't help but be inspired by the Raza Resource Center's mural, for example. Music, culturally inspired and student designed decor, programming or learning that resonates with you intellectually or culturally, and the spirit of celebration through a cultural lens. It may resonate with your own lived experience or just your interest. Everybody's welcome. Belonging also means other students sharing their story or experience, giving advice about classes, or who has the best food on campus, great advice, or where to get a haircut, right? Inviting you to join one of our fabulous student organizations or clubs. You know, we're a cluster of communities at UCSD: athletics, student organizations, community centers, etc. You find your place. And by the way, I think that our staff are incredibly wise and very skilled, but sometimes when a 19-year-old gives you advice and you happen to be 18, you take it in different ways. So using our peers to tell our stories is really important. Belonging also means professional staff inviting you to programs and events, connecting you to a mentor or an alumni partner or other resources that are designed for your success. But I also need to say that belonging also means it's okay just to hang out on the couch. It's okay just to hang out to talk or laugh or sleep or eat Cheerios. We had a cereal event this week that was wildly popular, right? Or play video games because you feel like it's a home away from home, right? Belonging also means the blossoming of friendships that will last a lifetime. By the way, when we talk to students and we ask, what do you think is most important? They will tell you, I want to be able to make friends, right? They also want good experience in the classroom. They want to become leaders. They want jobs afterwards. They want to be well, but they start with wanting to make friends. So I experienced all of that last week, including one event at the groundbreaking National Panhellenic Council Plaza, honoring the Divine Nine, the Black fraternity and sorority legacy. We were the first on the West Coast. We dedicated it a year ago, last October. It is spectacular. It's a special place. I urge you to come visit. And because our students share intersectional identities, I saw some of the same students at 3 or 4 of the welcome events. All the better. This is who we are. And if I have one last moment, Jim, to share, one of the things we're so interested in capturing sense of belonging that we in the centers are partnering with the Equity Division, Diversity and Inclusion's research and analytical team to study it. The question we ask is, how do you map student experiences that support a sense of belonging? How do we support them better to feel welcome, to feel valued as individuals? How do we center joy and engaging experiences for our students? So through a series of center-based pláticas or conversations, we're developing culturally sensitive metrics to promote student sense of belonging. So in short, we practice this, we live this, we celebrate this, and we study this in order to make sense of belonging meaningful for our students, because we know that true excellence is achieved when we all feel respected for who we are, our perspective, our background, and we should all be included. Centers are vital to that.
That's fantastic, Karen. Thank you so much for all of that. You covered some really big and small picture things at once in there, but just a couple of things to really kind of pull out a little bit within what you're sharing and see if we can just say a little bit more. When we talk about that sense of belonging and development, can you talk a little bit more about how the centers are a part of helping with student leadership development or just their overall wellness, or maybe even learning and scholarly growth? There's all kinds of things I'm sure the students could be seeking from this.
Sure, happy to. Let me tease out the wellness piece a little bit more, because belonging also means well-being, right? So we're not talking about clinical wellness necessarily. We're talking about a feeling of holistic well-being. So feeling like you belong is important. We create a culture of caring, right, in our centers. But sometimes we also realize we need a little more structured help, right? Sometimes we need a little more structured help. And it's easy to feel isolated, especially if you're a new student. Sometimes you feel homesick, right? That's not uncommon. First time away from home, sometimes you're homesick. UCSD is a big place. We're a big place. And sometimes students arrive with wellness concerns that continue to need support. And sometimes they show up here and experience them. We meet students where they are. So examples, some of us will experience anxiety or depression or grief or loss about a fractured relationship, a breakup with a partner, an argument at home, a roommate conflict. And there's the real world is lived here. And in those kinds of situations, or even if you're just lonely, we help students find someone to talk to. Our staff are trained, but we also partner with our counseling and psychological services exceptional team of counselors and professionals who are dedicated liaisons to our centers who regularly host appointment or office hours in our space. Students don't always have to go to the health center. They can come into the space, have private conversations with our wellness partners. We also host workshops or seminars on topics of interest to students around wellness, because well-being is a priority. We practice it, we partner to champion it. So that's the wellness piece. Can I say a little bit more about leadership, Jim? Okay. My academic expertise is federal Indian law, which I've taught over 30 years at multiple institutions. And I was listening to a recent podcast of some tribal leaders, and they asked the question to the panelist, what advice would you give young people about leadership? My ears perked up a little bit. And most said that young people should listen to their elders if they want to become leaders. That's wise advice. That's good advice. But one said something that really spoke to me. They said, our young people are already leaders, right? It's the job of elders to uplift them. That intrigued me because that's the space that I want to live in, right? That kind of learning, that kind of reciprocal learning together or from each other is a shared learning journey. We do that in the centers. We do that at UC San Diego. It empowers everyone, including to innovate, to affect needed change. Seeing students in that leadership space is really, really important to me. Also note that leadership doesn't mean you're the president of a club always. Leadership does not mean that you're the one with the microphone, right? Leadership can be a coalition builder, a team builder, a quiet listener, an organizer. Those folks are impactful leaders too. We need all of them. So how do we develop scholars who lead and innovate in a complex world? Because it's complex. We all agree about that. Where our young people are going out into challenging times, some of which we've anticipated, some which we haven't. But one of the things we do is intentionally work in teams. We hire students. Each of the centers hires 8 to 12 student interns every year. We work with affiliated student organizations and help them to develop programs or coalitions across centers or across campuses around timely issues or programs or events, and lead them as peers. I think supporting that peer innovation is just foundational in our centers. And they're encouraged to explore their own identities on this journey, but also their identities as change makers, their identities as innovators. We pride ourselves at UC San Diego on change making and innovation. We also partner with Alumni Association or Career Center partnerships for things like internships or jobs or public services. In short, the centers are sort of hubs for these kinds of opportunities, information, and implementation. We're not always one-stop shopping, but if we don't have an answer, we know how to get students to it. I don't know if you're talking about this, Jim, but leadership, we also are proud of our institutional leadership, especially around federally designated minority serving institutions. And the centers are part of that conversation. You may be making reference to that later about ANAPZ and HSI designations and the emerging one, but the centers are part of those, and that's important because those designations signal our campus commitment to students in a really powerful way, to those students' success, and position us for federal grants, potentially, to deepen our services and programs to those students.
It's fantastic, Karen. I just smile thinking about all this stuff. We're almost out of time for your segment, but I do want to, if I can work in one more question with you, and thanks for all of this already. Again, several of you submitted questions, and we hope we're touching on some of the things. Even if we're not sure we're touching on all of the things, I also put a link at the start of Karen's segment to a list of all these centers she's talking about, and maybe that's a place you can get some additional answers and otherwise stay in touch with us. But here's my kind of parting question for you, Karen. Again, we've made it clear you and I have both been at other institutions beside here, and we were both so happy to get to here. And I know parents and families, you're thinking about lots of different schools that your students may be applied to this coming year. So Karen, do you have any general advice for how families might ask questions about the presence of centers like this at other schools their students are considering?
Sure. when I left my former institution after 15 years, they were concerned about me finding my way, right? You lose a colleague and they say, well, how will you find your people, right? I have to tell you, I hadn't been here a week when I called them back and I said, I found my people, right? I have to say, honestly, the welcoming culture here is unlike anything I have ever experienced. I've never been more welcomed as a colleague. And I see that culture and that climate permeated throughout campus and in the center. So I've been blessed to work at universities, public and private, that value equity, diversity, and inclusion, and creating a welcoming space for all of our students. But here, I'm really, really inspired by our intentionality, right? How we center, how we embed inclusive excellence in the very fiber of what we do, right? In our outreach, in our planning, in our policies, our messaging, our practice, and how we center students thriving. One of the things I just wanted to share an example of, and then I'll give you 2 quick tips. What's unique about us is, for example, what we just completed this month, something called the Black, Latinx, and Native American Family Orientation. I haven't seen that done at other campuses. There are lots of summer orientation, transitional programs, but this one is unique. And it's a voluntary program designed to share information about our campus with students and families, right? And it's an immersive early move-in program for students, free to them and families, to come and learn about the campus, get advice, make friends, understand the academic mission, that sort of thing. It's before anybody else comes in. So you have this campus alone and a dedicated interest in you, with students, student staff and professional staff who spend an entire year trying to make this a meaningful experience for you. This year, we touched over 600 students and families. And the feedback from that is that it's transformational, right? That people feel like they're connected here. They have knowledge, they have friends, they have resources. That's a unique UCSD feature, and not just a good program, but that means we're living our values, right? We're practicing that. So what else should folks look at? Obviously, look at spaces. Wisdom sits in places, right? If we dedicate architectural spaces to important issues and people, that says something. Are there dedicated spaces and staff where your students will find community, where they'll find a home away from home? Will they find friends, support, comfort, safety, right? Will they find a place to explore and grow? And what does student-centered really look like on a campus? We pay a lot of attention to that here. And the other question I might ask is, what is the spirit of innovation and change making on a campus? Inside and outside classrooms, in labs, on and off athletic fields. We pride ourselves on that value, and we embed it in multiple ways. So seek those out, including our extraordinary community center staff. We welcome you. Thanks, Jim.
That's just so fantastic. Thank you for all of that, Karen. This is getting me re-energized as we start the fall together, doesn't it? And thank you again. You're welcome to stay around as well, but maybe you have a volleyball game to go to as well, for all I know. And everyone, thanks for bearing with us. We're about halfway through our time together today. And the rest of the time today, you're going to be stuck hearing from me, but we do want to make sure we spend some time talking with you today about some of the things related to our admissions process that may be on your mind. It certainly seems to be from a lot of the questions we got. And I also want to make sure we give these answers in a way that, kind of like what Karen just did, we think about ways to give you answers and give you ideas today that might hopefully help you with other schools that your student is considering. And again, we'd love to think we're the best place for your student to look, but there's lots of great options out there. And we know we're just one of them. That's what this time of their 12th grade year is supposed to be like. I also want to just take a quick shout out moment to talk about our transfer students. If by any chance we have some families on here today that are looking at a transfer admission, say coming from a community college, I just want to assure you we're thinking about you as well, and I will talk specifically about a few things related to transfer admissions during the remainder of the session today. But again, this is a chance for us to talk about some of the things that we figure in October are most likely on your mind. I can already tell you, by the way, that, again, there's tons of great questions we can't directly answer today, but some of those questions are helping us identify that our November version of this, just giving you some previews, we're going to have a chance to talk with housing, financial aid, and also our college system here on this campus. And if you haven't looked much into UCSD yet, or even if you have, this is one of the things that might really make us stand out from other places. In some ways, it's one of the most special things that made me want to be a part of this campus, is the way that contributes to how we do community here. But there's other ways in which we feel it can be confusing sometimes for folks, and we want to make sure we get that. So I'm not going to talk much about the college system today, even though we got some great questions about it. But I want to assure you that's coming up in our November edition of this. So talking about admissions, first and foremost, I just want to make sure we talk a little bit about how we and other institutions use deadlines. All of the UC system campuses here around the state of California, we have a single deadline that we all use for admissions for all students. And almost every single year, it's on the last day of November, November 30th. But because this year that's a little off in terms of the day of the week and how Thanksgiving falls, we've decided we're going to actually give everybody through December 2nd. And I really want to emphasize that the UCs, and I mean all of our campuses when I say this, we are one of these places that we do, and we're so fortunate for this. We get so much interest that we do have to hold to the deadline pretty firmly. But that December 2nd deadline is when you need to apply. Some other colleges out there and universities around the country may use what they call early programs in general. I'm not going to talk a lot about those today, but especially thinking about some of you who may think, boy, this stuff's really confusing. I didn't go to college, but now my son or daughter is. I just want to have some of the basics here. I want to touch on this. Early action and early decision are two kinds of programs that some schools have out there. And when they do that, it has to do with you applying by an earlier date and hearing back sooner. And in the case of earlier decision, it actually requires you to kind of commit to that school. You're kind of saying, we're going steady. And if you get in there, they're expecting you to do other things. UC campuses don't do either of these things. We have a single deadline. And if you apply right on December 2nd this year, you will have the same chance of admission as you would if you turn your application in tomorrow. We don't do anything about that. As much as we need to get going on the applications we get, it's the second most applied to school in the United States, by the way. As much as we need to get going, let us worry about that. We want you to be able to have time to learn things like you're hopefully doing today, get a chance to work on things. Your students should have a chance to think through what they want to put in there and make sure it's their very best stuff. So balance that out with how things are going. This is one of the many things I'm going to share with you all today, by the way, that you might put under the column of, wow, that sounds like an insider tip. And it's one of the reasons we're doing these webinars. But on the other hand, I just want to really emphasize, we love sharing this information. You heard earlier that I've been doing this kind of work for over 30 years at different institutions. And what keeps me in it is knowing that we're helping students and families make this step. And so anytime out there, somebody is trying to tell you they've got the secrets that UC doesn't want you to know, or that this college doesn't want you to hear, it's baloney. And it's a really good sign that you should run away, because those of us that do this work for a living, we want for this to be as transparent as possible. Sometimes it's just flat out complicated. We need you to understand that too. But please know that this is how we're approaching this, is we want you to feel as informed as you can. And again, we're going to even record this session today, so people that may not have been able to make it today, they can hear this kind of stuff later. But here's a few of the things I want to dig into today. First of all, just talking about what we use to decide who to admit here. We and the other UC campuses around California, and the Cal State system for that matter, among a growing number of institutions, especially for whatever reason here in the Western US, who have decided to go to a place where we no longer use SAT or ACT scores. You'll hear some people say test blind is our policy. We prefer the phrase test free. But one way or another, this is one of the starting points I can tell you, is what we don't use. So the UCs have no place in our process for test scores. We really don't need you to send them, but if you do, I just need to tell you, we're not going to look at them. We feel like we get a lot more information that we can use to make great decisions. And so we don't use test scores. Another thing that we don't do is we don't do rec letters, where you get a teacher or counselor to write a recommendation letter for you. And so we don't use those. And then also, we got a question about this from one or two of you, wondering if we do what some colleges would call interviews. And I want to emphasize that some colleges that offer interviews, that is very possibly a very formal part of their process, especially at, say, smaller schools, but who have some fairly competitive admissions practices. They may use an interview to help understand a little bit more about you. I've never known of one that would have you do that instead of writing out your essays and all those kinds of things. But those schools do give you that additional way to do things. And if you get that chance at those schools, talk with your school counselor or whoever else might be helping you to see what might be a good strategy for that. But just to let you know, that's not what we work with here. What we do look at is a lot of information that you provide to us regarding, or that your student provides. You better not fill out that application for them, by the way. But we really want to see not just what the student's done in high school overall, but to really understand those details. We will look at a self-reported version of their transcript that the UCs have used for decades now, in which you fill out everything you're taking, especially if you've been to multiple high schools or you've got some credit from a local college there. Be very careful in following the instructions to make sure you put what we need to see in the right place. We also will look at some things about your academic record that kind of go beyond that into the details of the rigor of the classes you've taken. So we value students taking what we call rigorous classes. That could be AP, but I just want to really put a note out there that we don't value AP as better than some of the other things you might do. Your student may be going to a school that's in the International Baccalaureate program or the Cambridge program. Your student may be taking some things that are just honors classes at the high school, or taking dual enrollment classes with the local community college or university. All of those things are considered forms of rigor in our process. And mathematically speaking, when we talk about students having up to a 4.0 GPA, for years now, we've been one of many schools that will actually let that student have more than a 4 point for an A in a rigorous class, for example. This gets a little confusing sometimes. I don't know about you all, parents, but when I went through this myself, and I'm old enough that I've actually had 2 kids go through and graduate college now. But I remember when we just did everything on a 4-point scale. So your students may be telling you that they have a 3.8, but a 4.12 weighted. And all that really means is that when we add an extra point to some of those rigorous classes, it's kind of a nod to the fact that the student's taking some things that are a little bit more challenging, and we want to balance that out. One other thing that we do in the admissions process is we really let you talk with us. Again, we don't do interviews, but we have, instead of a long single essay that many colleges use, we have a series of 8 PIQ or personal insight questions. And your student can pick any 4 of those that they think are the best for them to say, that's what I can speak to, that's what I can talk about. And they're small. They're not 4 really long things. There's 4 smaller things. And I would very much give you the tip that if your student is applying to UC campuses, as well as some places around the country that use that more standard kind of long single essay, the worst thing they can do, we've seen over the years, is if they just think they should kind of hack that up into 4 bits and drop it into these boxes. We really want to see students respond to the specific questions we give them. We list all of these on our website. I want to really strongly emphasize that we don't have any preference among those 8 questions. All kinds of different students pick different 4 questions to answer, and we want you to be able to do that in a way that really feels like the best fit for you. One other thing we do, and I mainly want to mention this because a few of you asked about it in the questions ahead of time, is mainly for those of you in California. And I know we have plenty of other people here from other states and even other countries today, so welcome to all of you. But for our California folks, you may be aware that we sometimes use a phrase called education in the local context, or ELC. It's a really complicated thing that's been around for a while, but the main thing it does is it helps all of the UC campuses have a way of understanding how you are doing in comparison to other students at your high school. So it's kind of a way of doing something resembling class rank, and it helps us sort some things out. Some of the UC campuses will sometimes specifically say how they prioritize ELC students, but your high school, and again, this is just for California, some high schools in California don't participate in this program. And if so, we want you to know you're okay. If you do participate in ELC and your counselor has told you, oh, you're in the 5% level for ELC, I don't want you to think that automatically guarantees anything either here. We have a lot of really talented students in this applicant pool every year. And so we take information like that into account, but it doesn't make for a particular thing. What I think all of you will find helpful to hear about this, if we can just step back from the state of California policy for a minute, is that one of the big philosophies we try to bring to how we decide on who to admit is that we aren't comparing everybody to everybody. We get a lot of questions this time of year about students saying, well, what if I go to a high school that doesn't offer AP and that high school over there offers like 20 AP classes? You're not at a disadvantage right away because we know that. We keep track of all that kind of information. And meanwhile, some of you may say, well, what if my school grades harder? Or I've always heard at least that my school, it's harder to get an A than it is at this other high school down the street. We will do, especially for those of you who come from high schools where we get a lot of applications, we'll do a lot of things to mainly see how you stack up within your school, because we think that's one of the biggest places for us to really have a meaningful understanding of that. It's not always possible. If you're our only applicant from your high school in the last 5 years, of course, that doesn't quite work, but we try to bring that balance to it whenever we can. And some of you have even asked us to tell you today how much each of these kinds of things matters. And while I guess I could tell you there would be a formula, I'd be lying. The whole point of how we approach holistic review is that we feel that for some students, these pieces of information might be the most helpful ways for us to understand them, whereas for other students, it might be these kinds of things. And there's some overlap there. But the whole point of holistic review is for us to not oversimplify what it means, to see what you've done in the context of what's available to you, and then the choices you made within those options. One or two other questions about this, and then I want to talk about things like your major and all that, because we got a lot of questions about that as well. But we got a few questions asking us about, what do I do to get if I'm from out of state? Because I hear it's harder to get in. So fun spoiler alert coming here, it may not necessarily be harder. We, like many other public institutions out there, are charged by our state with making a certain amount of space to our own residents, people that live here in California, went to California high schools. And beyond that, we do have room for additional students from around the country and across the globe. But really, each of those is a separate application pool. And so first and foremost, know that when you apply here, for example, as an out-of-state student, you're mainly competing with out-of-state students for those spots we have. If you're an international student, you're competing with other international students for those spots that we have, and then so on for California. Even though there's definitely some differences in who's on our campus, and again, we are very proud that we are charged by our state to make sure a good chunk of our students are from another state. I can tell you that this fall's class that just came in, we think will probably land somewhere around 22 to 24% non-California, so international or out of state. And we think that's great. And we have to figure out how many of those offers to make based on how many of those students tend to accept our offer and come here versus come somewhere else. A fancy college term for that is yield. We look at our yield rate. So don't think necessarily that our selectivity is higher for out-of-state and international students than it is for in-state. It's just different because these are separate things. So hopefully that doesn't confuse you more than it helps you sort some things away. I will also tell you that those of you that really get into numbers and you're comfortable looking at them, there's two really neat resources out there that you can go and find more about. One of them is called the Common Data Set, and it's basically a set of questions that every university around the country agrees to answer in the same ways every year. And if you were to go to our website and look up the Common Data Set, you'd see our answers to a lot of the other questions you might have about how many people applied, how many got in. Just this year, we're starting to break that into in-state, out-of-state, and international. And it does it for transfers as well as first-year students. The other great site that's out there is the U.S. Department of Education's College Navigator site. So that's another good option for you as well. College Navigator, I find, is very objective, and some of those other companies out there, probably the same ones that are telling you they want to tell you the secrets we don't want you to know. They might have data that's a little older. I worry that sometimes some of them think they know what it means we're doing, and they tell you what it means and they're wrong. But that's a whole other conversation, and I want to move on to some other things. So let's talk about majors. And again, lots of questions. In fact, I think this is one of the biggest things we got a lot of questions about from those of you that filled out the form. I'm going to mainly talk about UCSD, mainly because we only have so much time today. But I will tell you in general that those of you looking at your student coming to us out of high school, it is more often the case that many universities out there will first and foremost want to admit you for your overall strengths, and then think about what major you can have once you get there. Whereas transfer students, it's much more common around the country, including here in the UCs, that we will very much think about your readiness for the major you want to pursue and make that a very big factor in whether or not we admit you. And if anything, here in the state of California, we serve so many students coming out of the community colleges, and UC San Diego, by the way, offered admission to more community college students than any other UC system campus. We're very proud of that. We are trying to make sure that we bring in students as transfers who can get out of here in 2 more years. And so that's just a fundamental part of that. We'll come back to that for transfers in a few minutes. But with first-year students, you should know that we really are trying to, again, not let the major that your student picks be the reason that they do or don't get in. There are a few exceptions to that I'll come back to in a few minutes, but I'll just start with this general concept that UC San Diego, like many of the UC campuses, we will not only let first-year applicants apply with a requested major, but we will give you the chance, and sometimes we'll look deeply into the camera and say, we really want you to do this. We will give you a second choice major as one of your options. And I want to really encourage any of you whose students are thinking about some of the most selective majors I'll talk about in a few minutes, that you really encourage students to think about the second choice or a backup plan. We really want students to be able to study what they want, but I'll also point out to you that the typical American college student to this day, still about 1/3 of them will enter the major they wanted and graduate with that major. Another third will come in saying that they want this major, but they'll leave with that major. And the other third, you know what they do? They come and say, I don't know what I want to study. All three of those paths are great. And how we handle it here at UC San Diego isn't the way it's every other university around the country will, but it's something that I hope we can make clearer for you today. First of all, when we give you that chance to list a first or second choice major, not every student takes us up on it. And we know some of them really are thinking, I don't have another option. This is really what I want. We will always respect that. But we also give students the chance to say, I don't know what I want to study. And not only do you get a chance to pick a first and a second choice major when your student applies by the end of November or December 2nd this year, we actually, this is an all too well kept secret. We will let students keep updating their answers to the major question after they submit their application all the way through the end of January. So among the many things your student might be stressed about figuring out by the end of November, this actually doesn't even have to be one of them. Most of our students don't change their answer after this, but I just want to really normalize this, say it's great, it's perfectly okay. And again, part of that is the way we read your file. We're not reading it differently based on the major you said you requested anyway. So it's okay. You've got actually more time for this part than you do some other parts of the application. It's one of your biggest pro tips, I think, to take away today. So how does this work then? We do have a few departments on this campus that are wildly popular, and for which to really make them the highly ranked programs they are, our faculty need to keep those pretty small. Some of us have used the phrase capped majors in the past, but I can tell you we don't really use that term much here on this campus anymore. We're switching over to the word selective instead. And some of you may be rolling your eyes and saying that's the same thing, Jim. But we really are trying to send signals first and foremost. It's not as if there is a cap of the number of students who can be in one of these majors. But on the other hand, there are general categories that we need to keep them in. Some of our departments say we can't grow anymore, and they're right. But other departments are saying we would love to have more students coming into our department if that's what they want. So we've got a mix of those. The very short list of majors that we describe as selective now include most of the majors available in our Jacobs School of Engineering. Computer science and engineering is easily the most popularly requested department among all of those. Bioengineering, mechanical and aerospace engineering. And then we have a few other majors around the campus that are noted as selective on the application. But in some of those departments, it's just kind of a relative thing where we want to give you a heads up that it might be a slight factor in our decision on whether or not to admit a student. Whereas in other cases, it might be a very significant factor in what we do. So we're always kind of struggling with that to figure out each year, which is the best flag to give a major. Some of these you can tell will change from year to year. So we never want a student to shy away from those majors that are flagged as selective. They've got to admit somebody after all. But we just want you to be eyes wide open about that and for you to help your student realize there's other things they could choose. So that short list of majors, we're going to probably even send them an email that tells them, John, we see that you've really, picked this one major. We really encourage you to have a backup plan just in case. And we really encourage students too, to make sure that isn't just a different major in the same department. Computer science and engineering, which I keep mentioning because it is the most popular with this kind of situation. There's actually 2 or 3 majors offered within that department. You would not be helping yourself to list a second major in the same department as your second choice. But on the other hand, if that's really what you want, do what you got to do. The other thing I'll do here is address a big myth that's out there. Every now and then we hear students say, well, I was told if I list a second choice major, they'll think I'm not as serious about my first choice major, and then they won't give it to me. It's an interesting thought, but that's not how we think about this at all. If anything, when a student gives themselves a second choice major, it will sometimes help their chances of getting admitted because we can't always admit all the students, even if they're very strong students who want a major that's just simply incredibly challenging to get into. So I hope that's a little bit of help about what goes on behind the scenes there. I'll also say that not only can you change your major after you've applied, but after students get here, there are a lot of them that will change majors, just like that typical US student I told you about. But with that very short list of selective majors, it's definitely not automatic. It's definitely not easier. So we never want to see a student pick a really unpopular major thinking, oh, I'll just get in and then switch to computer science. We figured that out already. And so that very short list of majors, they would have you required to take certain classes your first 2 years here and then apply to get in 2 years later. And those spaces can be, again, for that very short list of majors, very limited spots available. So just do keep that kind of thing in mind. I want to really emphasize, though, that we do have plenty of students here who are undeclared. We welcome that. We love it. And that's a perfectly great way to go as well. Just a couple more things, because I know we need to wrap up and hand it back over to Griselda before we go. But a few things I just wanted to say are different for transfers. Again, we know we've got some of you all here in the room today, and I want to talk about that. Again, emphasizing that it's much more about your major if you're looking to come to us as a transfer student this year. And again, some of you may have a student that's in high school right now, but already thinking about this path. So you're looking a few years down the road. Good for you, by the way, if you're doing that. But it really is more about a student being able to come in with their general education work largely done and focus on their major after they get here. And so for that reason, it's important that you know that there's some really particular things transfer students should look at. We have what we call a 7-course pattern, and we're looking at certain classes that needed to be a part of what the student has completed at their community college, including some very specific things in English and math, regardless of what major you want to pursue here. And then for a lot of our majors, and they tend to be the STEM ones, the science, technology, engineering, and math majors. For those areas, there's something called major prep. And so for major prep, it's really important that that student complete a very particular list of courses related to the major, or they won't be able to come here. I'll tell you, one of the saddest things I see here that we're always trying to fix through earlier communication is we hate to see a transfer applicant have a great record overall, but go for a major with major prep and apply without having finished those requirements. It's kind of a no out of the gate just because of all the pressures and demands on us here to make sure we use our space in the best way possible. So really, if you're looking at the transfer route, see if your major has major prep and then make that your top priority along with the 7-course pattern for what you do. I know we need to wrap up here because we're almost at 5 o'clock, but we hope this kind of information has been a helpful start for you right now. Again, for the UCs, including San Diego, your student has a good almost 2 months left to go. And we really want them to be able to use that very much to their advantage. And again, take their time, check in with admissions officers. We try to visit a lot of schools in California and a few out of state and go to some college fairs as well. Again, these are folks that love to help you figure this out. So let us give a shot at that. And Griselda, I'm going to turn it over to you to kind of wrap it up for us now.
Thank you so much, Jim, and thank you everybody for staying on with us. I'm going to go ahead and move on to our next portion. Before we sign off, we would like to provide you with some important information regarding the application timeline. We encourage all of you to have your students apply to UC San Diego. You can apply to any or all 9 undergraduate campuses within the University of California system. The submission period runs from October 1st to December 2nd. We highly recommend applying to multiple campuses to increase your chances. The application fee is $70 per campus for domestic students and $80 per campus for international students. Fee waivers are available through the online application, which can cover the fee for up to 4 campuses if you qualify. Decision dates for first-year students will be received by March 31st. For transfer students, it will be received by April 30th. Regarding acceptance deadlines, first-year students must accept their offer by May 1st, and transfer students must accept their offer by June 1st. Please keep these dates in mind to ensure that your students do not miss the opportunity to join our vibrant Triton community. We also encourage your students to apply early, not apply till last minute, because we have had some technical difficulties and we want to make sure that they get their applications in on time and accordingly. Don't forget to connect with undergraduate admissions. We have a variety of events listed for your future Triton on our events page. So be sure to check it out and register to stay informed about these amazing learning opportunities. We recently just released a spotlight webinars where we focus on campus partners, amazing resources and programs. So we do encourage you again to visit our events webpage that can be found in our undergraduate admissions website. We also encourage you to subscribe to our email newsletter to receive the latest updates and news directly in your inbox. Email is a way that we communicate with prospective and admitted students, so you don't want to miss out. The best way to experience our campus is through our guided tours. We highly encourage you to visit and hear firsthand from our campus ambassadors who are current Tritons, and they will let you know about their experiences and insights as being a Triton. If you can't make it to campus in person, don't worry. We also offer a virtual tour so you can explore the size and beauty of our campus from anywhere. We also encourage you to connect with us on social media. Follow us on your preferred platforms and don't forget to tag us in your post. We'd love to see your content and we may even feature you by sharing your posts. If you'd like to explore more helpful resources, we encourage you to check out our YouTube page. It features a variety of relevant videos that you can review at your convenience as well. For inquiries about campus tours, events, undergraduate admissions, or the application process, we encourage you to contact the Office of Undergraduate Admissions. The best way to do this is by visiting our contact form found on our website, and we also please encourage you to check our website for office hours. And that's a wrap for our webinar today. Thank you so much, Jim, for this insightful session. Thank you all of you for joining us, and we wish you a wonderful evening. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Go Tritons and go Padres.